Okay. Hi, everybody. I'm live here today with Vanessa Fracheboud from the president of Mandy's, in fact, and also the author of her recent book that isn't quite out yet, Le Goût de Diriger. Vanessa, sorry, what's the title in English again?
It's Food for Thought.
Food for Thought, that's right. So I'm thrilled to have you here. Thank you so much for joining us today, Vanessa. This is going to be a wonderful, wonderful conversation, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you for inviting me.
Well, and thank you to everybody who's listening today. I think it's going to be a lovely discussion, and we're going to get some insights into Vanessa's leadership style, but also her career and kind of what got her here. So welcome, Vanessa. And I want to start at the very beginning, right? Because you have milestones in your career that got you to this position as president of a beloved brand in Quebec and a brand that's moving into Ontario. There's a few locations there as well. So maybe if you want to start with from the beginning a little bit and talk to us about, what some of your key career highlights have been and some decisions that led you to the C-suite at Mandy's.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I've worked in leadership roles across several industries, whether it's retail at David's Tea, food and beverage, pet care, pet food, and now food. But my true passion really lies in creating meaningful, beautiful experiences for people. I think that's always been what links every single industry. So I started my career at David's Tea before entering its IPO. And I then later became the vice president and CEO for the banner Mondu, and eventually found my way to Mandy's, the beloved brand. I've always been driven by purpose, aesthetic, and people. And then Mandy's felt like the perfect intersection of all three. So I had the purpose, the aesthetic, the people, working for two amazing women. I think the one thing when we talk about milestone is that my journey wasn't a straight line. It's a series of bold decisions that pushed me out of my comfort zone. And more often, I would say, saying yes to opportunities that others would have said no to.
Oh, that's interesting. Can you give us an example?
Well, the first example is when I announced I was leaving Mondu to join Mandy's, people were scared. They thought I was going crazy. Why would I leave such a stable? I was already a C-suite. We were doing tons of acquisition. We were having a lot of fun. I loved my team. It looked like I was in the perfect role, which I was. I truly enjoyed my time at Mondu. But then I said yes. And other people thought I was crazy because we were post-pandemic in the restaurant industry. Right. The uncertainty and the unknown. For a smaller company, all these things made others question whether or not I should have said yes to that opportunity. But look now.
Well, it was a bold move. And we see often, I do want to mention that we often see specifically women who will really wait on taking that risk. It's almost like I hear it a lot from women just saying, I don't think I'm ready yet. Right. So did you have people in your corner that were pushing you, some mentors maybe that were like, you're absolutely ready, just jump in with 2 feet?
Yeah, definitely. Both men and women. I can think about some women mentors outside of the roles I occupied, but even Martin at Mondu back in the time, he called me while I was on a maternity leave and asked me to come back to work on an acquisition. So I was surrounded by men who believed in me even before I believed in myself. And that's and that I'm really grateful for. So surrounding yourself with people who are pushing you to go above and beyond your limit, even when you think you're not ready. And then you just have to take a leap of faith, because who's ever 100% ready until you dip your toe?
That's true. That's a good
You just got to do it.
So what was that transition like, stepping into the role of president? Can you talk about kind of how your responsibilities and even your mindset had shifted?
Mm-hmm. I think I believe I've always acted as if the company I was working for was always mine. I often call myself an intrapreneur
Yes.
instead of an entrepreneur. Definitely humbling. And the biggest shift, I think, is you go from doing to enabling. So the role, because I started as an operation director, so I was in the field doing. But when you become a CEO, you need to hold the vision. Your main mandate is to align the team and to create a space for them to lead others. So it's all about guiding, definitely not controlling. You have to learn to zoom in and zoom out, because at the same time, you don't want a CEO who's too high in the sky. You need someone who's able to also zoom in, and to lead with intention. But I want to say it's just humbling, and that shift from doing to enabling.
So what surprised you most about being in the C-suite?
There's the bold answer, and then there's the smart answer.
Both.
What is that? Sometimes it surprises you who's sitting at the table. But the smart answer is more so that it's not about having all the answer. It's about showing up with clarity. So your role is to be curious, is to be courageous. So that courage that's required to sit at the table of the C-suite for me is really mandatory. The other thing that surprised me now is the emotional responsibility of leadership. And that's real. You need to be steady, but you also need to be human. And it's that balance. But there's an emotional weight that's definitely there.
Right. That's a good point. Hey, by the way, for all of our listeners, if you have any questions or comments, we're going to leave some time at the end of this conversation for Vanessa to respond to those questions. So feel free to pop some questions into the chat, and we're going to get to it a little bit later, okay? Vanessa, how would you describe your leadership style, and how has it changed over time?
I describe my leadership style as assertive but kind. I know exactly what I want and where we're going. I lead with courage. I'm transparent, but I come around with flexibility. So I'm listening and I care for people, but I truly care. It's not just an act. I do care, and I want people to grow. And over time, I think I've learned to step back even more and to trust the process, because I'm also very impatient. One of the things that I love the most is to be excellent in what we do. So if you're striving for excellence, sometimes it comes with impatience. So that's the one thing I've been working on, but definitely letting others shine. And leadership for me is clarity with heart. I'm sure you know Brené Brown.
Yes.
I abide by clear is kind, unclear is unkind. And that's what's serving my purpose of being assertive and courageous and transparent, but done the right way. It's the how. It's always about the how.
So what aspects of your leadership style do you think your team most appreciate? Would it be that kind of clarity and transparency aspect?
Well, I'd like to say it's because I'm kind. But other than kindness, yes, transparency. What you see is what you get. There's not much sugarcoating with me. I tell you things as they are, but I'm careful in the how I deliver the message and why and what's the intention behind. So if there's no good intention, then there's things I keep for myself. But if I know I can give feedback that's serving someone, I'll make it a mission to deliver that difficult feedback, even though it's much easier to keep it for myself. So I think that if you'd ask someone on my team, and I don't know if anyone joined today, but I think they'd say that they value my transparency and that I communicate with intention and that I care.
I have heard from some leaders that, you know, they want to be kind, they don't want to hurt anybody's feelings when they're giving feedback. And so that sometimes results in a lack of managerial courage or the impression of that because you're kind of, sugarcoating the information. But I remember speaking with Giovanna Buscemi, who's been a VP of HR, and she said you're actually giving a gift to people when you're being very clear because you're giving them the feedback so that they can act on it.
Yeah. I think that's just an excuse for us not giving the feedback because if you don't, and it really requires courage to be transparent, and it's much easier not to do so. But like you said, it's a gift, and no matter how bad it's wrapped, it's a gift. And I'm the first one to, like, nobody likes to get negative feedback, but the how and the time you take to process the feedback is super important. And so that's why I make it my mission. But I do believe it's some kind of excuses when we say things like that. We don't want to hurt people's feeling. Well, it's even worse. So we confuse kindness with complacency sometimes, maybe a little bit.
And has that always been kind of who you are as a leader, or did you learn how to cultivate that through watching leaders that you respect? Like, how did that become part of how you lead?
I've always been very transparent, but I think that earlier on in my career, I used a bit more politics than I do today. Today, like, yes, politics is still important. Like, don't get me wrong on that, but not to confuse politics and speaking your truth. Those are two different things. You can't please everyone. And as a leader, you're going to make unpopular decisions. You just need to own them. So I definitely evolved and grew along my career, but I think fundamentally, I've always been very honest. And it's a muscle. It's a muscle you can train.
Right. Okay. So how do you coach your leaders in that regard?
You have to push them to have courageous conversation, hold them accountable to have them take time to explain the why. I try to make space for real conversation and to bring clarity to complexity so that they really understand why it's important to be transparent and what's the ripple effect when you're not. So not just showing them what it's going to give them, but by not being transparent, what are the possible ripple effects?
It's interesting because I find in search, when we've shared that the hiring leader is very transparent, what you see is what you get, people breathe a sigh of relief. It's like, oh, good, because they don't want water cooler leaders, what I call them, people who keep information for themselves to serve their own purpose, right? Or will surprise you at different points in your career in a way that doesn't serve you. So I think, people pretty much want to have that transparency. They want to get that feedback. So I think it's an important leadership trait that needs to continue to be flexed, right?
Yeah, I think the other thing we don't talk about enough is the behavior we have when we receive feedback. I think that's an important factor because how we react to feedback will either allow your leader to give you more feedback in the future, or if you have terrible reaction to be given feedback, well, guess what? Next time they'll think about it twice. So I think it goes both ways. It's who's giving the feedback, but also how you receive it.
I love that. So have you always been good at receiving feedback then?
Absolutely not.
No? Oh, really? Okay.
Don't forget, I play to win. So I want to win. I want my team to be good. I have a strong ego. I'm very proud of the people I work with. So when I do get criticized, and especially in my at the debut of my career, I wasn't the best at getting feedback. And I remember Martin, he was good at giving me feedback, and he was being brutal and honest, but he cared, and that's why. But we were getting in those fiery conversation, and then at some point, I don't know what happened, but I had a haha moment where I was challenging something he was telling me, and I thought to myself, well, if you continue on that path, he's never going to give you any other feedback. So after that moment, I made like a statement to myself to just be and listen. Just be and listen. You don't have to respond to a feedback right away. So I made that shift. I listen. I let that feedback sink in, and then I think I got, and again, it's a muscle that you can train. I got better at receiving feedback, because if you're always defensive, well, guess what? That person at some point will not be giving you feedback if you always react poorly.
I love that. And I think that's a very strong indicator in terms of your ability to take feedback, in terms of how you got to where you are, right? Because you wouldn't have continued. It's continuous improvement when we're getting feedback from clients, from colleagues, from our own employees, right? From our leaders, from the board, from your co-founders. So yeah, it's a life skill, people. It's a life skill.
Yes. So you really have to think about your reaction, even more importantly than the feedback that's given to you. And then you just let it sink in. And then you can decide to act or not on it, but at least your reaction was
tempered. Yeah. So who has inspired you the most as a leader? And how have they influenced the way you lead today?
There's a few people. I just mentioned Martin, for sure, someone who inspired me. But the first people that comes to my mind, her name is April Sabral, whom I met at David's Tea back in the days. Her approach to positivity and leadership, and how she makes someone think about their own competency, I can say she changed my life. I often say that she's the one who unlocked my potential. And we only worked together briefly, but her impact was lasting and massive. So also the key takeaway here, I would say, is no matter how long you spend working with someone, you can definitely have impact on their career and their mindset. I would say her for sure. She's also the author of an amazing book called can't remember, but it's The Positivity Effect. Yes.
Okay. And she's on the leadership, the Retail Council of Canada, is she not? I think. Yeah.
Of Miami.
Oh, of Miami. Of Miami, not of Canada. Okay.
Yeah. She used to work in Canada, but she's smart. She moved to Miami.
Okay. So, talking about, just kind of wrapping up on the leadership qualities piece, are there any leadership qualities that you really admire in others that you are still cultivating in yourself?
It always comes back to courage, humility, consistency. Courage. I admire leaders who show up fully, especially when it's hard. And I always appreciated seeing someone handling a tough conversation with grace. So when I'm a witness of that, I absolutely love it. Maybe I'll probably even be smiling when I see someone ending a tough conversation with grace. It's that blend of empathy with strength. And it's something that I work on every day. So the courage. And I remember earlier on, it's easier said than done. I worked with a CFO. Man, she was carrying me, and I would let her take over the final decision until a point where I knew if I didn't say no, or if I didn't push back,
yes,
it would hinder my, like later on, it would have major impact. So I put on my big girl pants on and I said no. And guess what? It worked. And again, it's a muscle. So the first time you're courageous, it might be uncomfortable, but then you do it again and again and again. And again, it's the how. So being courageous is not to be mistaken with being rude or being aggressive. You can be courageous, kind, assertive.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the perfect recipe.
Well, and I think women specifically get targeted for, being called aggressive when they're just being direct. But to your point, I think that there is a balance in terms of how you're delivering the message with kindness, as you said.
Yes.
And thought.
You can be assertive and kind.
Right. So let's talk about Mandy's for a second, because Mandy's isn't just known for its food, but the vibe, the culture that they've kind of created. I think it was one of the first truly Instagrammable, food and beverage, like restaurants or food service that we've seen. I mean, everything was selected with care. Every location is just a little bit different and quirky and beautiful. So how do you maintain that brand identity as you guys are scaling?
And still is today. So the most honest answer to that is that it's by staying obsessively focused and obsessed on the guest experience, on the details, but more so over, you never take for granted your success. When you do, I think it's the start of the downfall.
Yeah.
And especially when businesses grow or they bring in an outside partners, the attention can quickly shift too far towards profit at the expense of the brand integrity. And that's when the poor decisions are made. Just look at what happened to Nike, the recent decline. I don't know if you read about it.
The recent decline of Nike.
Nike, they lost billions of dollars on the market because they went from a focus of being guest obsessed, and they were specific to sports and the attention to details and to their customers, and they moved away from that to a very profit-centered decision making. And it's kind of ruining the brand. And in the meantime, you get other brands like On, who's now leading the market.
Okay.
So for us, we're scaling the business, but you have to scale the soul as well, and not just the systems. So from how we greet guests to how we create our spaces, we continuously evolve. And I remember David Siegel at David's Tea often say, why you do something should never change, but how you do it should always evolve. And that really struck with me, as it's exactly that. And for Mandy's, the why we're doing things and why we're reinventing the world of salads has to stick. So our core values, they have to stick. The why, our people, that's what truly matters. And it's when you lose sight of that foundation that shit hit the fan. As for me, I ask myself the question, does this still feel like Mandy's, or are we moving away from the ethos?
Interesting. Well, and the Mandy's locations are all corporate owned, are they not? You're not working with any franchisees, so you're able to control the narrative and the brand. And
and it's and to be clear, it's just a different structure. As owners, when you start a business, you decide how you're going to fund your growth. I don't think there's one recipe that's better than the other one. It's just different ways of growing. The girls took that path because they really wanted to control, and especially the design and the food, that was really important to them. And they felt like if they were losing that piece, but there's brands that are doing it really well. And that are maintaining that.
Yes.
But it always depends, and it's a matter of choice and how you want to grow and what's your vision.
So how is it that you are approaching the building and nurturing of the team culture to reflect kind of the spirit of what Mandy's is and the values? How do you do that?
By fostering a culture of warmth, care, connection. It's not just training on task. It's to train on the intention. So when your team understand where you're going and the why, and you celebrate the wins, you talk openly about the challenges, and that you make sure that every team member feels like an ambassador of the brand, I think that's where you hit the culture checkbox. If you lose sight of that, or you don't bring enough attention, I think it can be detrimental to a brand.
It's you're at how many locations now?
16.
16 in Quebec and Ontario, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So I think Ontario did it just launch?
So Ontario, we have 6 in total. Yeah, we have 6 in total. So what started with the beautiful Ossington location is now 6. We have the Well near the Billy Bishop Airport, which, by the way, if I have people on this reel listening, it's 6 minutes away from Billy Bishop. You can even Uber eat your food.
Perfect.
Yes. And you can go through security with a Mandy side.
Yes. Yes,
tested it multiple times.
No plans to open at the Dorval Airport, at the Trudeau Airport anytime soon? No?
And no, not anytime soon, but we did look into that opportunity. But again, it's a matter of going from looking at every single opportunities to being strategic. And right now we're focusing on Ontario and Vancouver.
And Vancouver. It's going to do well in Vancouver. Yeah, for sure.
We're excited for Vancouver. Very excited.
So let me ask you, what is it that drives you personally, Vanessa, in your work? Like, what part of your role brings you the most joy and fulfillment?
Definitely creating something bigger than myself. Like I said earlier, I enjoy being successful, but it's not just for myself, it's for the people around me. So I play to win, but I want to help other people grow, to build something that's meaningful. And again, it might sound cheesy a bit, but the idea is to leave a legacy that lives through people, and to leave a mark on people. So whether I cross their path for a small period of time or if we work together for a very long time, I think it's that legacy that's what's bring me the most joy.
I love that. Have there been any moments in your career where you felt really challenged? Maybe nervous about a decision you were making or unsure, and like, how did you push through?
Where can I start? The C-suite is not for the light of heart. I often say it's about embracing chaos with grace, because you have to deliver tough messages, you have to make bold decisions, you have to stay grounded. I think what gets me through is reconnecting to purpose, learning to trust people, like blah, 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 like all part of the growth. But truthfully, I think it's what separates the good from the great, is that you don't just navigate politics, but you stay authentic, courageous, and you lead with purpose. I think that's the big difference, but challenges every single day. And again, it's the psychological, it's the mental weight that sometimes you can't share with everyone the doubts you have, because you have to stay somehow strong. But yeah, I'm human like anyone else. So I do have my moments of doubt, but I have a very strong circle. So I'm surrounded with a great group of mentors and people I can talk about those challenges and look at things with different lens. So maybe one of the solution is to surround yourself with a great circle.
Yes. And people who can call you out also, right? But also cheer you on.
Yeah.
Not just tough love. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, both. But you need that tough love.
You do. Yes. Yeah. In terms of failure, right? So I'm obsessed with failure in terms of, people being very transparent around mistakes they've made, what they learned from it, right? And we've all stumbled, we've all fallen. It's part of life. Is there a particular mistake that you experienced that actually became a stepping stone to your success?
Yes. Earlier on in my career, I confused being busy with being valuable, and I burned myself out.
Okay, being busy with valuable. Okay, hold on. I just want to kind of sit in that for a second. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we all do. We're just human.
Yes.
Okay? So those who pretend like they're perfect, it's a facade. And I talk about that in my book. I'm spoiler alert, but so the main dish in leadership is whether or not you're able to amplify others' talent or not, And the reason why I'm talking about that is when you're tired as a leader, everything feels urgent. And the breakthrough for me came when I learned to trust others, to delegate, and to let go that you can't do everything all at once. And that's where I really grew and made that shift. You have to sleep well, like the mother in me. You have to sleep well, you have to eat well, you have to move, you have to drink water, but you really have to protect your energy. And that's something I learned. And I'm happy I learned it earlier on in my career, so that now I'm showing up with my best self. But confusing being busy with adding value, you see that in every organization, not just the CEO, everyone. You want to show you're productive. So sometimes people don't allow themselves to just take a moment to think about what they're doing next. They're always caught up in the action, and everything becomes the same level of priority.
Urgent yesterday.
So you don't see clear. So that was one thing for me that happened earlier on that became a stepping stone for me, because now I'm being very careful in how I manage my energy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I have found that people will often hold on to responsibilities because they think nobody can do it as well as they can. And then they're afraid that the person that they're going to delegate to is going to fail, right? So how do you kind of cultivate that sense of kind of passing, projects and important work over to other people and delegating, while at the same time having a tolerance for potential failure or mistakes?
I hear two things when you share that. And one is ego. And so you have to be, well, ego and guilt. So leading out of guilt serves no purposes. I highly recommend once a year, but even multiple times a year, you empty your calendar and you start over. And you can even use color block if you have to, and really highlight where you're spending your time, what purpose is it serving, what's the return on investment of that hour, and even those one-on-ones. If you have a very large span and layer, and your layer is very wide, but you're spending your entire week jumping from a one-on-one to another and from meeting to meeting, you have to think about, like, okay, is it really adding value? Are we doing it because we've always done it? Or are we doing it because we feel like, and that's something I heard recently, we want to support others. So by supporting others, we don't put our mask on ourselves first. And we just give our time freely when maybe we weren't prepared for the meeting. It doesn't really serve a purpose. It's not working towards your goal. So it's really derailing you from doing what's truly important for the business. So again, not leading through guilt. I don't care how busy you look. The more busy you look, the more question I'm asking myself. And that's something that I share very often with my team. Some of them would be laughing hearing me say that. But again, I don't want to see people being busy. I want to see them adding value.
In terms of your book, right? So I'm going to plug your book right here. And thank you so much. So Vanessa, your book isn't even on sale really yet. I mean, you just did it's a pre-sale. I got my hand, she was so sweet because she sent the book to the Mandy's at 10:30, which is gorgeous. Congratulations, by the way. I love it. So it's in French and in English. It's hardcovered. It almost feels like a recipe book, but it's a bit smaller. It's fantastic. What made you think about writing this book?
I've always loved inspiring others to be their best self. And then one day someone said to me, you should write a book. And then I started thinking about it. And then I started saying out loud, one day I'll write a book. One day I'll write a book on leadership. And then I don't know, have you read Big Magic? from Elizabeth Gilbert?
No, I have not.
So it's a book around how to live your most creative life beyond fear.
Right.
And when I had my first daughter, I was in what I call my creative era. So the idea came to me of the food. And like in Big Magic, I decided to stop waiting and I pushed through the fear and I made it happen. So oftentimes people say, like, how did you do it? I just started. You just have to start. You have a project, you have an idea, and behind the book, what's the most important concept is that an idea will come, but the idea can also leave, and there's a momentum. So there's a momentum where you need to act on the idea.
Right.
Otherwise, it's going to vanish, either because someone else is going to do it, or because when you will feel ready to push through your project, the idea will be gone. You won't be able to have that energy or to really deliver on what you first thought was a good idea. So I pushed through the fear and I made it happen. And yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
for the Montrealers that are listening, or the Quebecers, I should say, not just Montreal, but definitely les Québécois who are on this call today, on this LinkedIn Live, we're a bunch of foodies. Toronto's getting there. They're getting there. Yes. But so the correlation between, setting your table, inviting your guests, setting the tone, making people feel welcome, the inclusivity of your table, thinking about how you're serving, what you're serving, and connecting that in to leadership is such an interesting idea. And I think, for a lot of us who, grow up just obsessed with food can really tie this in. Say, and it's funny because pre-COVID, certainly we saw that even to ink a deal in Quebec, you'd be breaking bread, you'd be meeting, you'd be, let's grab a coffee, let's grab lunch, let's whatever. And so we do have this kind of, culture of, food is very important. And so the fact that you were able to tie that, like it feels something extra special. Plus your role, obviously, as president of Mandy's, the imagery is beautiful, but the stories are important. And one of the things that you talk about, and we touched on it before the LinkedIn Live, but one of the things that I appreciated that you talked about is that people are afraid of numbers. And when you're going to be leading, you need to understand your numbers. Otherwise, you don't know where you're going. So do you want to kind of elaborate on that just a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So you don't have to be CFO to be a good leader, but you need to understand your numbers, and that I'm very clear about it, and especially women. So I talk about finance in a few chapters of the book. But I often hear entrepreneurs share with me, oh, yeah, but numbers, they're really not for me. So I leave that to like someone else.
Yeah.
Yes, you can hire someone, but you can't, you have fiduciary duties. You have to understand. And if you don't do it for yourself, do it at least for the people you employ, because you have a responsibility for them. And so I think it's putting your company at risk by not understanding. And that's the feedback I got from Martin back in the day. So my background is marketing. But I always worked in operation and sales. So reporting, financial statement, I could read them, I could challenge them. But he said to me, if you want to become a CEO, the one thing you have to add to your experience is you have to go and do some executive finance class, because how are you going to be able to challenge your CFO if you can't read a balance sheet, or if you don't even know what a balance sheet is?
Right.
So that's one of the great feedback that Martin gave me back in the days. But yeah, I do talk about finance and data and how important it is to have a grasp on it so you can understand. You can zoom in and zoom out, but you're accountable for the success of your business. And again, especially in the restaurant industry, because most of us are artists.
Right.
Started a project out of passion for food, not accounting.
Yes. Yeah. So in the book, is there a particular story or lesson that feels especially personal or meaningful to you that you'd like to kind of tease us with?
Honestly, all of the book is personal.
Yeah.
From where it's being printed, to the colors, to the choice of the partners I worked with. But in terms of story, if I had to choose one, well, there's two chapters that are deeply personal, but the one about setting the table with my mother, I know we spoke about that one. It's a metaphor for leadership and how preparing a space where people feel safe, seen, valued. And for me, that ritual taught me the power of intention. So I do talk about that. And it was a surprise. My mother just read it 2 weeks ago. Yeah. So you never know the impact you have on other people when you create those meaningful ritual, which is a second chapter where I talk about rituals.
And I do want to highlight that at the very beginning, your dedication of the book to your children. Again, you and I discussed this, but talking about to your daughter about being able to wear running shoes or high heels, it's her choice, right? Making, and I think that's important in terms of what we're creating for future generations of leaders, for our children and for women, right, who are coming up behind us. So I love that so much. So I want to, as a mom of two daughters too, I want to thank you for putting that in. Okay, so what advice would you give to somebody looking to lead a purpose-driven brand or stepping into a senior leadership role for the first time?
That's a good one. Stay clear on your why. The why should never change. So your own why. And if you haven't read it, the Ikigai book is a really good one to really understand your why and your system value. Don't chase titles.
Oh, okay. Let's talk about that for a second.
Chase impact, not titles. And I saw one of your posts where you said we gave the raise, but we didn't give the title because of the impact of giving a title too soon. So don't chase titles, chase impact. Surround yourself with amazing people who elevate you and keep you grounded. And don't be afraid. So maybe for them, even most senior roles, don't be afraid to hire people that are better than you. Don't think that's a weakness. I think it's smart leadership. So
yes, amen to that. You can't be brilliant at everything. You need people who are going to watch out for your blind spots and we'll call things.
But more so, it's exhausting if you're the only smart person in a room, and that's the outcome when your team is maybe too junior, where you have to jump in every single discussion or decision that has to be made. It's a very big burden to carry. So don't do that.
Mm-hmm. And what do you think aspiring executives often underestimate regarding leadership at the top?
It's the emotional weight.
In what way?
Yeah, because being in a C-suite, sometimes people think it's just making decision, calling all the shots, but it's not. It's about holding space, managing energy, setting the tone. It can be heavy at some times because you also have to make those unpopular decisions. Those unpopular decisions, you have to be courageous, you have to be transparent. So I talk about courage and transparency, but it comes with a weight. It's exhausting to be always honest, to act with courage. So there's a weight to that. And the way I balance things out is staying healthy, taking care of myself, taking a step back, prioritizing. But I can add that if you lead with integrity, it's also incredibly fulfilling.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm curious, Vanessa, sometimes we see leaders stay in their roles for years, decades, right? How do you stay on top of kind of learning new things, being like keeping your mind open to new possibilities? Are you part of certain networking groups? Are you part of different organizations? I think you're a big reader, but how is it that you are able to continue to learn and grow in your role?
I always stay curious. That's just who I am. It's my human nature. But to be curious, to have the desire to learn, to understand that you don't know it all, and that you can seek that additional executive education, attend conferences, build your network, learn from others. So I did a few things, and I did a lot of executive education, which I love, and not just for the content, but for the people I met. I work with BDC, and the council part, they have their curriculum is amazing. I did a military exercise, which, if you know, you know, met great people. So yeah, stay curious, learn.
Expand your network.
It's a great recipe.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so it's 46. I'm just going to see if we have any questions. Oh, so Maria Copez said, I love it. Wish more leaders were like her. So that's a nice comment. And Kathleen Angelis said, inspiring. Thank you. And Scott Arsenault said, way to go, Vanessa. You continue.
Hi, Scott.
So if anybody has any questions, we're trying to demystify the C-suite a little bit, but if you have any questions, feel free to post them in the chat. So Vanessa, if you were going to give advice to kind of, the who you were at the start of your career, right? If you knew then what you know now, is there anything that you would tell Vanessa from, 15, 20 years ago? Are you happy with kind of the path that you've taken?
Yeah, absolutely. No regret at all. I would just cheer myself and tell myself how proud I am.
Yes.
The other thing I can maybe share is to work on your self-awareness as much as your strategic skills. They're both so important.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I do want to I want to go back to the beginning a little bit, because I think, I keep thinking about how often we reach out to female leaders for their next stepping stone, and how often we hear like, I don't think I'm ready yet, and I think that there's something worth of, just jumping in with 2 feet. But for professionals who could be ready, but they might be a little bit insecure, what suggestions would you give to them? Is it around finding the right place? Is it around like the right culture? Is it more about, maybe some people need to grow more in the same organization they're at because it feels safer? Like, what's your thought on that? What advice would you give them?
I think women in general have to the courage and the confidence. Again, it's that muscle you have to train. I wish more women were more confident. I would say you don't have to be perfect. No one is. We're just putting costume on ourselves. We go to work every single morning. We're all humans. Yes, some might not be ready for roles. Mm-hmm. But if you're curious, you have self-awareness, you did your work, you did your credential, why wouldn't you be ready? Mm-hmm. And if you don't try it, you'll never know. So when I was debating whether or not I would leave Groupe Legault to go to Mandy's, I remember my boyfriend said to me, well, there's just one thing we know for a fact, and it's that if you don't do it, you'll never know, and you'll regret it for the rest of your life. It might be the wrong decision. It might be just another milestone, but if you don't do it, you'll never know. and you'll regret it. So he said,
No
just do
regrets.
it.
Yes, just do it. It's funny. That's something that we tell people a lot, right? Is, are you going to regret in a year from now? Because I mean, there's always great opportunities out there, but it's rarely the same opportunity that will knock twice.
Yeah.
So yeah, living with no regrets.
And don't get me wrong, you may regret your choice because you loved where you were, the team, you'll regret the people you worked with, but you can also build something completely different. There's a few moments when I change role or I change environment where and I'm not going to disclose where, but I almost cried on my first day because I thought, oh my God, what am I getting into?
Yeah.
But I used that as a lever and said, you know what? I'm going to roll up my sleeve and I'm going to make it as I think it should be, not how it is today. So if you see things as opportunities, you roll up your sleeve, you can create something meaningful in a lot of environments, even though they're not perfect. It's how you react.
How important is it, Vanessa, for CEOs, for senior leaders to have outside contacts that they can kind of bounce ideas off of and have gut checks with? Like, do you find having a small network of people that you can rely on outside of the business is imperative to success?
It's essential.
Yeah.
I cannot be more clear than that. So what I'm doing, I'm in a CEO club. I network. I have mentors. I have peers into which I can confide when I'm going through some challenges, because the CEO role is a very lonely role, very lonely. You make your decision, you lead the way. So if you don't have a network surrounding you, good luck. I'm not sure you'll enjoy the ride as much as those who do. So it's essential. And what's great too that we didn't talk about is when you go from being in a group to mentoring other peers. That's also very fulfilling. So I did a few mentorship sessions with Monday Girl to help other executive, either middle management or in director or even some VP roles, help scale their business or get to that next level in their career, which is very fulfilling.
So talk to us a little bit about the mentorship that you did with Monday Girl, because I had seen that you had posted that some time ago. What was that experience like?
I did a few workshops with Monday Girl. I really appreciate it. A group of women that are driven, passionate, they want to succeed. It's kind of your boys' club, but done in a different way. So I did a workshop on expansion. There's a few entrepreneurs there with companies, and they had questions and wanted to understand the do's, the don't, and my learnings along my career. And then I shifted towards the art of negotiation, which is a subject I really enjoy talking about, how to negotiate the do's, the don't, the steps, the recipe. And I got really great feedback from it. So
fantastic.
I keep on going.
So I know that you're a big reader. If
Yes.
you were to recommend 3 books, what would they be?
Radical Candor from Kim Scott, The Positive Effect from April Sobral, and Dare to Lead from Brené Brown. Oh, can I add a 4th one?
Yes.
Aside from my book, The Multiplier by Liz Wiseman is a fantastic book. So The Multiplier is a great one. Yeah.
Okay. So what's the future look like for you, Vanessa? What are you excited about?
I'm excited for a lot of things. Obviously, the launch of the book. I'm excited for expansion in Western Canada. And then who knows? Who knows where we'll be in a year from now?
So regarding the book, where is it that do you have a wait list right now, or how can people sign up for the book?
Yes. So the website is active. And because I started talking about it here and there, I already have tons of orders, which I'm very grateful for. Just
Congratulations.
not very ready, but so I'm pushing through. So the book is available in French. I have both the French and the English version on the website. It's foodforthoughtclub.com. And the book will be launching September 23rd. So if you're in Montreal and if you want to join me for the big launch, we're doing an evening at La Terrasse Perchée of the William Gray. It's going to be a beautiful evening. And then the next day, the book will be available online in the Mandy's restaurants and on the Mandy's website.
That's perfect. So we have a few minutes, and I'm curious, do you feel comfortable talking to people about kind of what your publishing journey was like? Because you're self-published, right?
Yes,
Talk
absolutely.
to us about that.
So I took two different paths because I always knew I wanted to write a book, then the idea and all of that. But I also have a job, a very fulfilling job. So it's a passion project that I was doing at night, weekends, overnight, middle of the night for the last 5 years. And I did meet with a few publishing companies, great companies, and a few of them said, yes, maybe not the right timing, or yes, our plan is for like in a year and a half, or the timelines. And there was a lot of constraint, which I'm fine by. And then there's another publishing company who said, we love your book, but we think it won't really resonate in the Quebec market. We think it will be better in the rest of Canada, given that Mandy's is very Anglophone. So I got a few feedback and comments, and I said, you know what, let me just do it myself. I know how to surround myself with great people. So I didn't do it all by myself. That's the one thing to really understand is I didn't do everything by myself. So I hired a graphic designer, and I hired someone for the logo, and I hired an editor to read over the book and give me feedback. I hired an illustrator. Who else? I hired a food photographer. She's amazing.
The food photos are incredible, actually.
Yes.
It's basically project managed your book.
Yeah, exactly. I project managed my book. I worked with another great photographer in Montreal for all the portraits. She came to my house. So definitely it's a very big project. But I pushed through it and I made it happen, and now it's launching. It's an investment, but it's a passion project, and I'm very proud of it. And it's a legacy. So if you at least take one thing and apply it to your life, and it changes your life in a form or another, then mission accomplie. I'll be happy.
We have a comment from Grace Taylor, inspired by your ideas on momentum. So easy to get distracted and lose focus in our daily tasks and forget the big picture. You have made me think differently about the why.
Oh, I'm so glad. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah, that's amazing. So I'm actually curious, because we have like a minute and 30 seconds left. When you have met talent, right? When you've brought talent into the organization, or you're sitting down with talent that's already there that you want to grow and develop, how do you get them to maybe think about their future in a different way? In terms of, we see big things happening for you. Like, how do you prepare them for next steps and to grow them?
There's again an amazing book for that from John C. Maxwell called Help Them Grow or Watch Them Go. So I don't think it's a choice you have. So you need to be curious and understand what the people on your team, what's the desire, what their career goals are, and then you just work with that. Just be careful with false promises, because that's also something I've seen where people tend to over promise roles or promotion, and then people have expectation, and when it doesn't happen, then they're disappointed. So just like that little blind spot to be careful with. But if you make it mandatory to understand your team's goal and you work around it, and you have honest conversation, you give feedback, you have a development plan, you push them into looking at things with different lens, you have them challenge you and your ideas, I think you can help them grow. Otherwise, they're going to go somewhere and get that growth elsewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. We're out of time. Vanessa, thank you
Yes.
so much for your time today. It was such a pleasure. Huge fan of yours and of Mandy's. And yeah, we appreciate you being here today. And I would encourage everybody to go get your copy of the book and really wish you a lot of success, continued success.
Thank you. And thank you, everyone, for joining.
Thank you, everybody. Take care.